Hello, everyone. I'm Cadet Emily Rowley, your Professional Development Training Officer, and this is Aircast. This week, we will be discussing flying in the civilian world and in the military world with Cadet Nicholas Statzer. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Cadet Rowley said, I'm Nicholas Statzer. I'm a current senior. I study aerospace engineering here at the University of Cincinnati. My job is the Operations Training Squadron Commander.
My favorite squadron.
Yep, you know it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I've only ever been in Operation Training Squadron, but I love it.
Well, it's a fun time there.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get started with the first question. Can you describe your experience getting a pilot's license?
Yeah, so my experience with getting a pilot's license started, I believe it was my sophomore year. Well, really, my inspiration to get one started my freshman year. The spring semester of that year, I'd started volunteering at a non-for-profit aviation museum, building an airplane, like an experimental airplane for civilians. And while I was working there, I got to hang around a lot of pilots, a lot of engineers, a lot of people who were interested in the same thing that I was. And after talking to a lot of these people, I realized how easy it was to actually get started in flight training. Doing it was as simple as just calling up an airport and really just saying, "Hey, I'm interested in flying. I want to schedule my lesson this date and this time." So when I decided I had the funds and the time to actually get involved in training, I called up an airport. I said, "Hey, when are you first available? I want to go on a flight lesson." And they let me know when they were available. I came in, and that's when it all started. Granted, that was only the first step, because obviously, you don't just walk in day one and you just magically know how to fly an airplane. You have to learn how to fly it, you have to learn how to take it off, you have to learn how to land it, and then you have to learn all the other regulations and stuff that go along with it. But my start to aviation was fairly easy.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. So I know you have your sport pilot license, right?
Yes, I have my sport pilot's license.
So what has kept you from going on to recreation or private?
I guess the thing that's kept me from doing it is just doing military aviation. So
Yeah.
I know that soon I'll be going off to IFT and UPT. At IFT, I'll get my private pilot's license. So might as well save myself $1,000, $2,000 rather than save that money and just wait till I go to IFT, then spend it now and get a private license. That's been my thinking.
Yeah, no, that's good to think ahead like that, and that's a good thing to think about. Maybe if you don't have the money, you don't have necessarily the scholarships, and you know that you want to be a pilot when you commission.
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say to people is when you're flying, you're taking lessons. You shouldn't be burning yourself out mentally, and you shouldn't be burning your wallet.
Right.
You should be doing it at a comfortable rate, because if you're worried about flying, if you're worried about paying for it or worried about having the time for it, then you're not going to dedicate the proper mental bandwidth to actually learning what you need to learn.
Yeah, that's a really, really good way to think about that. Yeah, I've just been taking flight lessons when I'm on co-op and stuff. I love it. It's fun. I go to the same airfield as you because
Red Stewart.
You recommended it and I loved it. Yeah,
it's great. Those airplanes they're a lot of fun. They're definitely older than at least two of my grandparents. So it's a little wild taking one of those things up for a ride.
Yeah, and you're taking off and landing on a grass field. It's a little shocking when you first get out there and you're like, wait, I'm going to be taking off on grass?
Yep. That's how they did it back then.
Yeah, it's surprising, I guess. I just never, and when I first got there, I had no idea how small the plane that I was going to be going up in.
Oh, yeah.
Was going to be, and it was crazy. But I remember I don't know, I think I probably had 8 lessons, but it was maybe 7 lessons in. We went to a airport nearby, and it was actually pavement, and they were yeah, we're gonna just take off or land and take off on pavement to show you how the plane handles, and it was way scary.
Oh yeah, I remember one time I went up with a private pilot friend of mine. We took off from the grass strip, obviously, but we went to Dayton Wright Brothers, which has a paved field. And I tried landing on that strip, and I bounced so much just because it wasn't used to it, just landing on a paved strip. But you eventually learn how to deal with all different types of landing material. So
part of the process.
Yes.
What is your favorite part about flying?
So my favorite part of flying, I guess I really have two parts. Number one, like the actual act of flying is, I'm sure you can say this about a lot of different hobbies, but you just kind of get in this moment where you're kind of in a zen state where you have this focus around you, but you also have the ability to just kind of take in everything. So, when you're up there, like in my airplane, it's typically 5,000 feet. It's not very high off the ground, but it's still, you get this miraculous view of how big everything is, and being able to really just get a good picture of the world and the scale of it all is just amazing. But then there's also that factor of you're still flying an airplane, you're looking for traffic all over the place, you're looking at the instruments in the airplane, you're looking outside, making sure everything's fine. And you're also like looking at your body and telling yourself, hey, like, does everything feel right with my body? Am I doing well? So all those things combined, it's a really interesting marriage between man and machine. That's the way I kind of describe it to people. It's something peculiar, and you really don't experience it any other way, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's truly amazing that you can be like on the earth, on the ground 1 second, and then just a couple minutes later you're a couple 100,000 feet up in the air. And it's so cool to just like look down and get a different perspective.
Oh yeah.
On everything that was around you, because you drove there and you're looking around and then you're up in the sky and you can hardly even see like the small linear path that you took to get there, because you just have such a wide view. I don't know. I think it's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, it is. And the other thing I absolutely love about it is the people in aviation. If you hang around an airport enough, you'll meet some really interesting characters. Even with like what I do, so like I volunteer at a non-for-profit aviation museum. Me being a pilot kind of gives me it gives me something in common with a lot of other people. And what you tend to realize is there are a lot of pilots, especially in the Dayton, Cincinnati area, there's a lot of pilots. And you'd be kind of shocked at all the different backgrounds they'll come from, military, civilian, maybe came from a foreign country, came here to learn how to fly. Lots of different people come from a whole host of different backgrounds, and getting to talk to all these people who are so different, but yet you all share the same bond, the same interest in flying. It's a pretty miraculous thing.
Yeah, even the short amount of time I've done it, I've definitely met a lot of interesting people. Everyone has their different way. I mean, as a student pilot, I pretty much only met instructors at this point, and everyone has a different way of teaching and a different way that they think about when they're, like landing, taking off. And it's interesting because they'll be like, well, if you really like someone, you can call and you can try to schedule with them again. And I've just kept finding people that I like. Like, I've had like 6 instructors that I really liked, and I just like getting all their different perspectives.
Oh yeah. And sometimes, when you're learning, you'll think that to yourself that you learn really well in this particular manner, but you'll run into somebody else who teaches you something completely different. You learn something new from somebody every time. Even if you don't particularly like them, they'll tell you something you'll think about. You're like, that'll stick with you for a little while.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it becomes part of you as a pilot.
Definitely does.
What are some of the things you share with people who are interested in flying? Like, what do you tell people?
So one of the things I tell them is that it's a lot of studying, a lot of book work. There's just as much practicing, like actually going up and flying, as there is just being on the ground, looking into pilots' operating manuals, regulation manuals, and just studying, learning it. Because at the end of the day, you need to be knowledgeable in all these things. You're dealing with a mode of transportation that's definitely a lot more complicated than just driving a car.
Oh, yeah.
And, miraculously, it's kind of funny, because I think you need, 50 hours minimum to get your driver's license. I think of, driving time before you actually get it.
Something like that.
But, a sports pilot's license, the minimum is actually 20 hours.
Yeah.
Now, granted, when I got it, it was only 36. I got in 36 hours.
Yeah.
But it is miraculous, the amount of training that really goes into becoming a pilot. All that book work, that studying that you have to do to even get to the point where you're proficient in actually flying the aircraft. So that's the one thing I tell people is you got to be good with, you got to be completely okay with just being on the ground and learning it. And then number two is try not to rush it. I think a lot of the time people, especially if you talk in RTC, people want to get flight hours. People want that experience because it'll translate better to their Pixum score when they go up for a pilot slot. And what I tell people is, at the end of the day, you gotta stage yourself. You gotta space everything out properly so that you get the most out of the training. You learn the most. Mm-hmm. So if you find yourself burning through money quickly and it's like super stressful, you're doing it wrong. You shouldn't be stressed out. You need to do it at a rate that you find comfortable because you're going to learn more and you're going to be able to keep that high proficiency of learning and all that information that you've retained. You're going to be able to retain it better because you're not as stressed out about all these other factors going on in your life. And the same thing goes with just the timing. If you're super busy, if you're taking 20 credit hours, you don't want to stack on so much flight training that every time you go up in the airplane, you only get so much out of it. Yeah. Whereas if you have the time spaced out, every time you go up, you'll get so much more out of each flight, that proficiency, and that'll carry on to the next flight. And that's how you build up credibility and proficiency as a pilot.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely had to take a break myself as I've had quite a bit of responsibility this last semester with my wing job, FTP, and my school. It's been quite a bit of time commitment. But yeah, no, I think that those are great things to consider and maybe people don't necessarily know about when they are, thinking about starting flying, because it really is like just a completely new environment, and you have to learn about it, and there's so much to learn about it. I mean, it's like we drive in cars every day, like even if you don't have your license or before you were 16, you still had to drive in a car to go to school every day, go to work, go get food, but you don't ever just like go and take a plane to a restaurant or something. So it's you really only do it to like travel, and it's just completely different, honestly. Like commercial flying is not even in the same realm, honestly. So it really is completely new. So yeah, you do have to learn a lot. Something that I think about, and I've talked to people about who are interested in getting started, because I've only just started, is something you said earlier as well, how easy it is to just get started. You just call them, ask if they have flight lessons available, and schedule one when it works for you.
Oh yeah.
And you can ask around, get advice. I did that with you, and you took me on a flight.
Orientation flight?
Yeah, kind of an orientation flight. I think that was so fun, and I loved Red Stewart, so I went back. But yeah, I mean, people are kind of just like shocked when they're like, wait, so how do you just call them? And I'm like, yeah, it's really easy. And you just schedule an hour, and if you like it, then you can go back. And if you don't like it, then you don't ever have to go back again.
Yeah, and especially if you just want to see if it's for you, taking that just one flight, taking that one lesson just to see if it's right for you.
Yeah.
I tell people you'll know after the first or second flight if this is something for you. You're either gonna love it or you're gonna be like, it's whatever.
Yeah, really. It's not a commitment, really. I mean,
oh no.
Yeah, they don't care if you come back. I mean, they hope you do, because they would love having you back, and they also probably want your money a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But like there's nothing holding you to coming back, so just signing up for one lesson to see if you like it.
Yeah. And hey, if you choose not to do
simple.
And if you choose not to do it, then hey, you got a cool story to tell. Hey, I've been up an airplane, I flew an airplane once. Cool.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. What are some lessons you've learned as a pilot?
Oh, lessons I've learned, man, there's so many. I'd say the first lesson I learned was the first big plateau that I had to get over being a pilot. So the first major hurdle I had when I was going through my pilot school was landing. Takeoff was so much easier for me than landing. Because landing, you see, what happens with landing is you're coming in, on your final approach, and you just see the ground come up towards you. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know about me is I used to be super afraid of heights. I used to be afraid of heights when I started pilot training.
Wow.
So the whole concept of like the ground coming towards me and just seeing that visually when I was during doing the landing would freak me out because I'd be thinking about, oh my God, what happens if I hit the ground? Okay, what's the worst that could happen? The plane skids and it breaks. Or it could just burst into a fiery ball of flames. It'd be horrible, right? And so while I was actually doing the landing, the approach, these thoughts would just flood in my mind, and I'd tense up. I wouldn't think about flying the plane. And so after a few times of just trying to learn how to land this plane and really get a feel for it, my instructor told me something that honestly I've kind of applied to life. And he told me, if you think about crashing the plane, you're going to crash the plane. You got to keep flying the plane. You just got to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And, the second he told me that, I realized that, when I worried about not really getting the job done, I worried about the worst thing that could have happened to me in that moment. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. The fact that I was so worried about crashing it or whatever, something horrible happening, I wasn't focusing on actually making sure the airspeed was steady. I wasn't worried about making sure my altitude was good. I wasn't making sure that, hey, everything else is clear. I was so worried about crashing the plane, I wasn't focused on anything else, that honestly, if the instructor wasn't there, probably would have happened. So what I kind of take away from it is, when we go through life, we tend to really worry about stuff. I think especially with social media and stuff like this, we become sort of all up in our head, way more than probably, past generations have been. I could be wrong, though. But I tend to think that we get so much in our head and we psych ourselves out so much whenever we try to do something. We try to do something hard, or even if something particularly unfavorable or unfortunate happens to us. I think we tend to worry so much about the horrible after effects of that, whether they be reasonable or not. And we tend to forget about all of our routines that we regularly do that keep us balanced. I mean, I can speak for myself. Whenever I get super stressed out, I'll tend to stress eat or something like that. And it's like I typically try to make sure I maintain a good diet. But if something happens or something throws me off kilter, I don't run as much. I don't eat as well. So simple things like that. That's what I think of as flying the plane.
Right.
That's what I do to maintain a normal life. And when bad things happen and my mind drifts away from it, that's the first sign of trouble.
Yeah, that's smart to think about. Yeah, if you think about it, fear is really just you worrying about all these things that could happen, and it's definitely takes your focus away from what's really important, and definitely can screw you up when you need to focus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I will say, the flip side of that is always have a plan B. That's the other lesson I've always had. Going through. So I'll tell you this. So during flight training, my instructors always told me about, you always have a plan B. If your engine goes out, you don't think about how horrible it would be if the plane crashed, if your engine went out. You should be constantly thinking about, where am I going to land this airplane if the engine goes out? Looking for land and the proper way to set up something if something if something unfortunate happens, right? Mm-hmm. And so my instructors taught me that constantly. And I took that to training, and I'll tell you what, it almost held me out one time. I tell a few people this. I believe I've told some people in the detachment this, but there's one time where I took a cadet up for a flight, and it was kind of a cold day. It was kind of moist, and so what tends to happen is the engine carburetor. The carburetor is the part that mixes the gasoline and the air together. If the conditions are right, that'll get filled with ice, and it'll choke the engine. And we were flying one day, and that started to happen. And I pulled the carb ice back, luckily, before the engine kicked out. But I already knew at that point, when the engine was starting to kind of die down a little bit, I knew that there was an airport right there off my right wing. Mm-hmm. I was within a mile glide slope. I would have been totally within the realm of possibility for me to land there. And so everything was perfectly fine. The engine kicked back into life. That was because of my good training, and that's because I thought of a plan B. Mm-hmm. I'm entirely confident that, if something, if the engine would have died or something horrible like that happened, that I would have been able to get back and everybody would have been safe.
Yeah.
And that comes from training and having a good plan B.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very important to get that training because it's dangerous if
Mm-hmm.
you're thousands of feet up in the air in something that, isn't, foolproof. Things can happen. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's something that I think I've learned is really like the weight of it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous to be up there if you don't know what you're doing. So you really have to learn all of the rules of the Federal Aviation Association.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn the plane, and you have to, learn your checklists and just make sure that you're going to be safe when you go up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Also, something that I think is interesting is the idea of redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always a good thing. Like if you think about things like English class, you get points off in your essay if you turn something in and your teacher marks something in your essay. This is redundant, take this out.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn about it in engineering classes, and you realize that it's not always a bad thing, and it's actually a necessary thing sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a habit of, and for flying, but this goes for anything. Like if you have something that you need to do, you have a checklist set, and you have a routine. That's going to set you up for success. I mean, so in terms of an airplane, you have a checklist there. You have a routine of what you check before you get in the airplane to make sure that's all ready to go. Same thing with the daily routine. You have a set of everything that you're going to do. I'm going to brush my teeth, take a shower, get my breakfast in. This is what we eat for breakfast. And doing all that stuff is going to set you up for success and hopefully mitigate any trouble you're going to have down the line.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's part of it. And then also, like, if you think about it, it goes down to the very machine that you're flying. I mean, there's so many redundancies within, like, the design of the plane, just in case something fails.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely... the engineers who build those airplanes know that stuff fails. That's why they'll put like 3 of each module, or ways of making the machine so that if one part fails, you're not totally in hot water.
Right. Yeah, and then like when you're going up, goes back to the checklist, but you're checking the tires, you're checking the gas, you're checking the oil, you're checking the gauges, you're checking every nut and bolt on the plane itself. You're checking the wings, making sure it has full mobility, and you're checking the stick, making sure that it works with the ailerons and rudder and stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of tedious, but it can really save your life someday.
Oh yeah. I mean, partially goes back to what I said about flying the airplane, doing what you're supposed to do. I can tell you one time when I was a little kid, we lived next to an airport, and me and my father were driving down the road, and an airplane crashed in the middle of the field, so we drove off the road to go, help him, make sure he was okay. The pilot was okay.
Crazy.
He was mostly okay. He was injured. He had a broken leg, but when we got to him, he was very angry, and he was talking about how he got the airplane from his friend, and his friend didn't fill up the gas tank for him. And it's like, well, you probably should have checked the gas tank before you went up, because that's in your checklist. And he was, obviously as a kid I didn't know this, but as an adult and a licensed pilot, it's like it's always your responsibility to make sure that thing is okay. You're going to take that thing up. You are the one who's responsible for it. Yeah. I think that goes for really anything in life. If you're responsible for something, you need to make sure that you go through a routine, and make sure all your eggs are in order.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Very well said. Do you have any mentors or role models you look up to when it comes to flying?
Yeah, so like I kind of said before, when I was a freshman, during my spring semester, I started volunteering at a non-for-profit aviation museum. And while I was there, I met lots of different people who were involved in aviation. For an example, one of our pilots there is a retired brigadier general in the Air Force. He was a test pilot, and he was actually one of the guys who signed off on the F-22.
That's cool.
Oh yeah. There's another guy who was a former U-2 pilot, used to fly to the edge of space.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, and there's another guy who was actually crew chief on the B-36. You might not know what airplane that is, but if you type in B-36, look it up. It's an airplane with 6 propeller engines and 4 jet engines. It's a ginormous aircraft. And there's so many other people there that are just like them, but those are like a few examples. And at that point, I had no thought about flying. Like I knew I liked aircraft, but I had no clue I wanted to fly. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I was actually afraid of heights, so I kind of thought, well, I'm going to check that off my list. That's not ever going to happen. So working at this museum and working with these people who had a lot of life experience. I mean, they had so much. I mean, it's insane how much wisdom they all had. Working with them, it made me realize the type of person who I really wanted to be. And it wasn't necessarily just a matter of, this is what I want to have a career. It was more of, this is the type of life I want to live. This is the type of person that I want to be when I get older. I want to be a stand-up guy. I want to be somebody who can be accountable and be there for other people. And the trend I saw was most of them were in the military. Most of them were in military service. And so working with them, I kind of realized, like, this is what I kind of want to do with my life. I don't know if I necessarily want to do the traditional kind of work 8 to 9, work in a cubicle, climb the corporate ladder. I mean, that if that's your prerogative, feel free to do that. But I just kind of felt personally that wasn't really. I think I had a higher calling than that. Whether that calling was coming from a higher power or just from the people around me, I knew there was something more in store for me. There had to have been.
Yeah.
So one day, we just got finished maintaining an aircraft. We brought it back inside in the hangar bay, and we're all in the break room. And a few of the pilots were talking. They were reading this Air Force Times magazine, and the article was talking about a pilot shortage. And they were all talking about, man, if you ever wanted to do it, fly aircraft for the military, this would probably be the prime time. And I thought about it. I was like, that'd be kind of interesting. Maybe I'll give that a shot. Maybe I'll see how that works. So, 2 weeks after that, I called up the airport, asked them, hey, when's the first time I can, start flying? They said, next week. They'll sign you up. And I think it was a month after that initial conversation with those guys, I walked into the Air Force RTC detachment, and was like, hey, I want to do this. They're like, well, it's near the end of the semester, but we can get you in about a year. You want it so you'll have to wait a full year to come back and do this program. Yeah, because by the time I asked to sign up for RTC, it was the fall semester of that year, but it was the end of that fall semester, and I was going back on co-op.
Oh, okay.
So I wouldn't be back until the next fall semester.
Yeah.
So I had to wait an entire year before I could actually do it. So I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prepare myself. So I got myself mostly in physical shape. First day, PT still killed me, all that stuff, but it was all fine.
Same here.
But I also learned to fly, and I very quickly fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And so I think those guys especially, those guys are definitely my mentors. And working with them, that's the biggest thing I tell everybody is find a mentor. Find somebody that you want to emulate, whether it's career-wise or character-wise, because that is going to point you in the best direction. That will give you the most insight in who you want to be as a person.
Yeah, and that's the story of how we have you here at Detachment 665.
Yeah, it's miraculous.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I definitely look at you as a mentor for flying,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I definitely come to you when I have questions because I know you're knowledgeable, you know your stuff, and you love it. So
Mm-hmm.
I know you wouldn't steer me wrong.
No, I wouldn't. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I remember back when you were the professional development training officer. I think that was what it was called,
Mm-hmm.
and you did a ground school.
Yeah, I did. I did do that.
Mm-hmm. And I remember going to that, and I think it was really cool. I loved it.
Yeah, it's just because I understand that a lot of people, it's a subject that a lot of people want to learn about, but it's that aspect of people are surprised. They're like, wow, it's that easy to get into flight school or whatever.
Yeah.
It's easy to go take a flight lesson. That sort of mindset of like, well, it seems so unreal or seems so out of reach that I don't even know where to start. And so giving people that ability to kind of learn information and figure out where they can learn more about it, I think is the most important thing to getting more people involved in aviation. Not just in the military world, but in the civilian world as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that was an amazing idea, and you really took that from nothing. So definitely learned a thing or two in your ground schools. So
well, I achieved something out of it, didn't I?
Yep. If that was the only thing, it would have been worth it. But I think you got a little bit more out of it too. What is your favorite plane that you've flown?
My favorite airplane that I've flown. So I've flown 3 aircraft. I've flown the Piper Cub, I've flown the Aeronca Champ, and I've flown the Cessna 172.
Okay.
And so for anybody who doesn't know exactly what those are, the Piper Cub and the Aeronca Champ are both tail draggers. They're both aircraft that weigh less than 1,200 pounds. Very, very light, low horsepower engine aircraft. They're definitely low and slow flying. The Cessna 172 is quite a bit more advanced. I don't know exactly how much horsepower it has. It's definitely, I think it's more than 100. It weighs considerably more. And it has radios, GPS, depending on the model you have. So it's going to sound kind of funny, but I personally like the Piper Cub. It doesn't have a radio.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't have a radio. It doesn't have GPS. You literally just have 5 gauges, one for airspeed, one for engine power, your compass, your altimeter, and then you have your oil temperature and pressure gauge. That's literally it. That's all you have. Your gas gauge is literally just a bobber in front of the aircraft. There's not even like a gauge that you look at. It's literally just a stick on a bobber that pops up and down. But that was the first airplane I ever flew. And there's something intimate about flying an airplane like that, because your stick and rudder skills, you actually handling the aircraft, there's just something about it that really it makes you have to think about how your body's responding to everything. There's so many different instruments that you don't have. When you make a turn, you have to feel it in your body whether or not that turn is coordinated well, that you're doing everything in the airplane right, and not having a radio, at first it kind of sounds scary. It's like, well, crap. How am I gonna communicate with all these other people in the air? But not having a radio, and another way is just being able to look around, and you have to basically rely on your visuals so much more without that radio. Obviously, there are times where I'd like to have one, but it's definitely got a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it really teaches you a lot to have to do all those things, like manually, and learn everything. I can't imagine flying in a plane where you don't have to coordinate your turn yourself. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Especially as a new student, it takes you a while to learn how to not make yourself airsick, trying to turn the airplane back and forth. Oh boy, yeah. My first lesson was so airsick.
Oh, yeah.
I take Dramamine before I go.
Oh yeah.
But I have flown the Piper Cub and the Aeronca Champ, and I think I like the Champ a little bit better. I think that they pretty much fly the same, in my opinion.
They're mostly the same. From my experience, the Champ is a little bit less stable, but you also get the benefit of sitting in the front seat.
Right. So, I think that's why I like it better, just because I'm kind of short and it's kind of hard to see out the front when you're sitting in the back. So that's why I've been flying that one, like in my more recent lessons, because they said like pick one to stick with, so that way you can like really get to know it. So yeah, I've been going with the Champ just so I can see better.
Which is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, no, and they're fun little planes. They're really a gust of wind can just knock you off course.
Yeah, low and slow. That's the name of the game of those airplanes.
Yeah, they're fun though, and it's really amazing. Like you get in and there's hardly enough room for 2 people, and you're like, this thing is gonna take me hundreds of feet up in the air, but it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's the magic of flight.
So, what is your all-time favorite plane?
Oh man, so I'd say my all-time favorite airplane would be the F-104 Starfighter. If you ever look, type it in, you Google it, Bing it, whatever your prerogative is, but it's this really cool, sharp-looking aircraft from, I believe, the 1950s is when it was manufactured by Lockheed Martin. It's basically just it's a manned missile. It has these short, stubby wings, this giant engine in the back, and it's made to go really fast. I want to say its maximum speed was over Mach 3. Don't quote me on that. It was at least Mach 2.
Wow.
But I know, if I remember correctly, Chuck Yeager set an altitude and a speed record in it back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very cool looking airplane. And believe it or not, there's actually a place where you can fly them. You gotta pay like $20,000, but there's a place down in Florida near the Kennedy Space Center. It's called Starfighters, believe it or not. They have like 8 of them, and you can, if you have $20,000 to spend on something, maybe not tuition or whatever it is, you can go ahead and pay to fly in a Starfighter, learn how to fly it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, if I ever hit the lottery, can tell you where I'll be.
Yeah, I should have known that you were gonna say a plane that I can't think of in my head, because I don't think I've ever seen a picture of one of those.
I feel if you type it up, you've probably seen it before. I feel like a lot of people have probably seen it.
Okay.
They just don't know the name. Not everybody knows the name of anything.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
So it's pretty fast fighter then.
It's a fast plane. It just looks cool. It looks like something out of this world when you look at it. It's like, wow, like that can fly. Like the wings are small, very small. You can definitely takes the imagination to think about how that would soar through the sky.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that they were like designers, like around a drawing table, like, okay, so what size are these wings going to be?
Yeah. So we got this giant engine, and we're going to make these wings super small, make it fly. Boom.
Yeah. I'm going to cheat a little bit and choose a spacecraft.
Okay. What's your spacecraft?
Crew Dragon.
Crew Dragon. Oh, is it the SpaceX, right?
Yeah, so it's like the first spacecraft to bring humans to the ISS privately.
That's right. I know. Believe it or not, one of the places I co-opted actually manufactured the bulkheads for the capsule, that Dragon capsule.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Very cool to be a part of that mission.
Yeah, and it's really the prime time right now because, that mission just happened over the summer, and like the first one to bring humans to the ISS. And it's been having recurring missions, and it's the first one to do so from American soil since the space shuttle missions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just so cool. We're bringing it back, and I think that SpaceX is just really awesome with their mission because they're really trying to just like make spaceflight affordable, which is really what we need to like move into the future and keep going with these bigger and better missions like going to Mars.
Yeah, well, I think what's amazing about it is I think America, I mean, I can't remember when exactly the last year we went on the moon was, but, a lot of people just kind of thought, when Gene Cernan got off the moon, everybody was just kind of like, well, when are we going back? And for all these years, we haven't, our presence in outer space has pretty much been the ISS.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the fact that SpaceX has such an ambitious goal moving forward in space travel, I think it's really opening people up to just the potential that we have in the hopefully the next decade, but it's definitely the next few decades.
Yeah, and NASA's government funded, so it kind of is sort of impacted by public opinion as well.
Oh, absolutely. If people don't think space is important, then they won't fund it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and then like we still haven't even had a woman on the moon yet. So
no, we still gotta wait.
So we'll see that soon, within the next 10 years, I think.
I'd love to see that in my lifetime.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's their next mission, so...
Can't come soon enough.
Yeah. No, they said it was going to be like, I don't know. I think they first said they were going to do it in 2020, but then I think they said they were going to do it in 2024, but I'm not sure if they'll hit that one.
They got it.
But it'll be soon, I think.
Hopefully they don't keep pushing that date to the right.
Yeah. No, that's their next mission. It's called Artemis.
Artemis, that's right.
Which is Apollo's twin sister.
Oh my God. I love
so
it.
Poetic. Yeah.
God bless those
it's
astronauts.
amazing. And then the Crew Dragon can also like do reflight missions. So it goes up to space, comes back, lands, and it can fly again.
That's awesome.
It's amazing.
Man.
Yeah, it's a huge step in making spaceflight more affordable.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so
good pick on the spacecraft.
Thank you. I wanted to bring it around a little bit. Okay. So what are you most worried about for UPT, or for those of you who don't know, undergraduate pilot training?
So I guess the most the most worrisome thing for undergraduate pilot training is just being in an environment that I'm not accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Ohio most of my life, actually pretty much all my entire life. So I guess going to a new state, going to entirely new places is going to be kind of, I'm hopefully not overwhelming, but it's certainly I'm going to be on my guard a little bit. But also just the fact of going through undergraduate pilot training. People have talked about the workload, and I'd like to think that I've had a heavy workload. I mean, I've had 21. This is the first semester in the past 3 years where I didn't have 21 credit hours. So a heavy workload is something that I'm accustomed to.
Yeah.
But from the way that people talk about UPT, it's almost seems like your entire week, all 5 to 6 days is entirely encompassed in trying to learn how to fly, which isn't necessarily worrisome to me, because at least I'll be doing something I love.
Mm-hmm.
But just making sure that I have my time management skills is definitely something that I'm slightly worried about.
Right. Yeah, it'll definitely be a lot of work. How many weeks is it? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think it's like 44 to 56.
Oh,
it's
wow.
right about a year.
Wow. That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Because, we even break everything up into semesters. So.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, you got your work cut out for you, but but that'll be so cool, coming out on the other side.
Yeah, I hope so.
What are you most excited about for UPT?
The people, honestly. Being in a group of people where you all have that same common goal and the same interests. I can talk anybody's ears off about flying, aviation, that sort of thing, and to be in a group of people where, for the next year, all you're pretty much going to be talking about with each other is aviation, flying, like, oh, how do you do this? How are we going to study for this test to make sure we all get through this sort of thing? Kind of being involved in that sort of group, I think, is going to be it's going to be awesome, to say the least. Being with people who are like-minded. Obviously, probably different. We're all going to come from different backgrounds, but we all have that same ambition towards a goal, a common goal. At the end of the day, I think that's going to be the best part. It's been the best part about Air Force RTC, and I think it's going to be the best part about UPT.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, how it's really similar to how we are now. We're all have the goal of commissioning into the Air Force, but we're all different, but we can come together on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that'll be cool, exciting. I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Where can this happen?
So there are 3 UPT bases. The first one is in Columbus Air Force Base, which is in Mississippi, if I remember correctly.
Sounds correct.
There's Vance Air Force Base, which is in Oklahoma. I believe it's about an hour away from Tulsa. And then the last base is Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. And I believe that's close to the border of Mexico. It's further south of Texas.
So I know you guys haven't found out
Nope.
where you're going yet, but if you could choose, which one would you go to?
So I believe on my sheet I picked Columbus, just because it's closest to home, and I got family and loved ones that are going to be in the area of Mississippi regionally. So
yeah, that'd be cool.
So I'd like to do that. I think I put Laughlin as my last one, which it's geographically the furthest away. So that was kind of my logic when it came to picking the bases.
Yeah, no. Understandable. What is your dream job in the Air Force?
Oh boy, my dream job. So I guess I'll kind of preface it with I'm still figuring stuff out. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what's all out there. But if I had to pick today what I would be, probably a test pilot. Definitely, working with all these people who are in that field, having them as mentors, it definitely kind of steers me in that direction. And at the end of the day, I'm an engineering major. Mm-hmm. The idea of designing and working with aircraft, figuring out, what can make an aircraft better, more stable, more better for the pilot, more powerful, fast, all those different things, it interests me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a gearhead too. I like to turn wrenches whenever I can. So if I don't ever take my car in for an oil change, I always do it myself. So I'm just that type of person. So definitely when it comes to aviation, I love the flying part of it, but I also love the aspect of working with the machine, figuring out what I can do with it, what we as a collective Air Force can do with it.
Mm-hmm. I think, I agree with you. I think that idea of development and working on breaking edge knowledge of flight and going into the sky, it's just so appealing. I completely agree with you on that. I want to do flight test engineering, so.
Yeah, I hope I get to work with you someday then.
Yeah, that would be so cool. And for those of you who don't know, test pilots and flight test engineers go to the same school, so.
Yeah, it's Edwards Air Force Base, correct?
I'm not sure.
In California? I think it's California.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. It's only like 2 hours away from LA, so.
Ooh, be there by the LA Olympics. Probably not.
The weather's got to be better than Ohio's, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. California. But yeah, no, I hope we're there there at the same time. But yeah, I think that would just be amazing.
Oh yeah.
Getting to help design the best, fastest, most maneuverable aircraft that are in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if something interests me else, like maybe if I realize, I really like the tactical side of flying, maybe weapons school.
Yeah.
Really, I'm kind of leaving it open.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I have my goals, absolutely, but, if something else interests me or something else pops up, I'm not scared of maybe changing plans a little bit.
Yeah, no, you never know what you're going to like before you get started.
Okay.
But yeah, test pilot, it's a little bit of a dangerous job. What do you think about that?
Well, my family definitely has some thoughts about that, but I don't know. I mean, people slip every day in the bathtub and get hurt that way. My whole thought of it is, it's an important job. It has to be done by somebody. Why not me? And at the end of the day, I think it's not as, maybe like back during the 50s, it was definitely more dangerous than, a normal pilot. You definitely more test pilots by numbers died than airline pilots. But I think today we've gotten to a point where the standards and the protocols that we use during flight test definitely improve the safety and the integrity of the experiment as well. So I don't think it's as dangerous as it was back then, but obviously there's risk in anything.
Yeah, completely agree. You can get hurt doing anything, but it's definitely a lot safer now, so kind of some consolation.
Yeah, we can definitely thank people like Chuck Yeager for that. So.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. What's your favorite quote, and can you please explain it?
Yeah, so my favorite quote is by the Bishop Milton Wright, who is the father of the Wright brothers. And his quote is, "We learn much by tribulation, and our hearts are bettered by adversity." I believe that's the gist of the quote. And when I think of that, it kind of goes back to that whole thing of flying the airplane, that kind of lesson I learned. And so, we all deal with things in our life that come up. We all have things that bridges we have to cross, obstacles we have to leap and bound over. And no matter where you come from in life, you're going to encounter that sort of thing. But the only way that you're truly going to improve and get where you want to go is by accepting challenges and kind of using every challenge as an opportunity to make yourself better. Whether that, hey, I got to, this class is really, kicking my rear right here. I need to worry about, making sure my GPA is good, or, hey, maybe I'm trying to prepare for a fitness test and I've never worked out a day in my life. So, depending on what that is, taking on that challenge is going to improve you, whether it's spiritually, mentally, physically, or through whatever mechanism you have. And that's what I've kind of taken through my life is, if I'm not challenging myself to the point where I'm learning something, I'm improving, then I'm not doing something right. I'm in a constant competition with myself. And I think a lot of people tend to look at other people and say, well, I need to do better than this person in order to get what I want, or, I wish I was better than this person or ranked higher than this person. And I think that's a wrong way of looking at life. I think you got to think of the long game, and you got to think of yourself, hey, how can I be a better person than the person I woke up tomorrow as? I think that's what I kind of go through life, going through.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. I'm thinking now about that Simon Sinek talk where he talks about the infinite game. And
such a good talk.
Yeah, and it really made you think differently about, like, your competition. And it's not about, like, being better than them. It's just about, like, how can they make you better? And really the person that you're competing with is yourself, and you just need to be better than the person you were yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you're succeeding, that's how you're growing in life.
Yeah, it's definitely more sustainable than judging yourself against others.
Yeah,
because then you kind of get in your head, you're like, oh my god, this person has all this, I got to compete against that.
And
no.
Really, you're living completely separate lives. So it's like, how are you're comparing apples and oranges here?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that people will drive themselves crazy if they don't see that.
Yep, but you got to remember to fly the airplane.
Yes, always remember to fly the airplane. Thank you, Cadet Statzer, for taking the time to talk with me today about what you enjoy about flying and what you've learned from flying, and talk about some of your mentors and some of your stories. I think that everyone will really appreciate hearing that. And if anyone's interested in flying, I hope that this kind of tips the scale for you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody has any questions about anything, don't ever feel hesitant to reach out to me.
Yeah, like Cadet Statzer said, if you guys have questions, we'll be happy to continue the conversation. Okay, Aircats. Well, remember to fly, fight, and win, and I will catch you next time on Aircast.